Hello, my bomb blowers and module masters, and today I am here with another Cube Talking and Nobody Explodes modded module tutorial, and today I am here with the module Game of Ants. Game of Ants combines two popular concepts in the community. We've got Game of Life and we've got LinkedIn's Ant. It helps if you know the two concepts before starting this module, but it's by no means required. Let's go ahead and get into this. This module requires no edge work. We can go ahead and get started as soon as we get our bomb.
There is only one perfect solution.
Let's
there
start
are
with
clues
this
that
one.
will try to trick our team.
So, the main point of interest on the module is this 5x5 grid with arrows surrounding it. The 25 cells will be either black or white, and they may or may not have an ant in them. This module is a diffuser read and an expert work module. The read is simple. First, you're going to read the cells in Game of Life fashion. This is reading off the white and black cells, and for each row, you're reading off the columns that have white cells. So, for the first row, because there are white cells in the third and fourth columns, we would read off 3, 4. Next we have 4, 5, then 2, then 2, 3, 5, then 5. And then we're going to read off the column totals of 1, 2, 2, 2, 3. This corresponds to how many white cells are in each column and is common for people to do when diffusing bomb in a voice team setting. Okay, now that we've read off the grid, and by the way, I'm using ones for whites, blacks as zeros, if that wasn't clear. Now that we have done the black and white states, we're going to read off where the ants are. I'm going to make a separate 5x5 grid. So we have 2 ants. The first one faces right at alpha 2. The coordinate system that I'll be using has A, B, C, D, E for the columns, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for rows. So alpha 2 faces right, and an ant in alpha 3 that also faces right. From what I've seen, the module will never spawn an ant in the corner. If it spawns an ant on the edge, then it will face the opposite direction from the edge it's on. The direction an ant is facing, it corresponds to which direction its horns are. So these two are both facing right. And because they spawn on the left edge, they're going to be facing away from the left, which is towards the right. If any of the ants spawned on these 3 spaces, they'd be facing left, facing away from the right edge. And so on. So now that we've gotten the read, we don't even really need to see the module anymore. So I'm going to make it go bye-bye. So, here we have a 6-step process. Once we follow the 6 steps in order, we will get the final state of the grid. Steps 2 through 5 do form a loop, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I like to divide this module into 3 stages. The first stage we do is a Game of Life stage, where step 1 says to perform 1 iteration of Game of Life on the cells of the grid ignoring the ants. If you don't know Game of Life, it is a cellular automata, which is much more complicated which is much simpler than it sounds, where you just apply a simple algorithm to all cells of a grid. If the cell is black, which is the zeros, if it has exactly 3 white neighboring cells, both directly, up, down, left, and right, and diagonally, then it will turn white. If it does not have exactly 3 white neighbors, it will stay black. For each white cell, if it has either 2 or 3 white neighbors, it will stay white, otherwise it will turn black. I like to refer to these as being alive if they're white or 1, or dead if they're black or 0. So let's go ahead and do the first iteration of Game of Life on our grid. Black cell with 0 neighbors stays dead. Black cell with 1 neighbor stays dead. White cell with 2 neighbors stays alive. White cell with 3 neighbors stays alive. Black cell with 3 neighbors comes alive. Black cell with 1 neighbor stays dead. Black cell with 2 neighbors stays dead. Oh, forgot to Move to the next row. My bad. Black cell with 4 neighbors stays dead. White cell with 3 neighbors comes alive. That stays alive, even. A white cell with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black cell with 2 neighbors stays dead. White cell with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black cell with 4 neighbors stays dead. Black cell with 4 neighbors stays dead. Black cell with 3 neighbors comes alive. Black cell with 2 neighbors stays dead. White cell with 2 neighbors stays alive. White cell with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black cell with 3 neighbors comes alive. White cell with 1 neighbor dies. Black cell with 1 neighbor stays dead. Black cell with 1 neighbor stays dead. Black cell with 2 neighbors stays dead. This had 2 neighbors, my bad. A black cell with 3 neighbors comes alive. And a white cell with 1 neighbor dies. Okay, so we have done the Game of Life iteration. Let's move on to steps 2, 3, 4, and 5. So these steps combined form what I like to call stage 2, which is the ant stage. So in this ant stage, each iteration is going to have what I like to call 3 different steps. We have the toggle step, the schmove step, and the rotate step. First is the toggle step. The first thing we do is toggle all cells that any ants are currently on. So we're going to toggle the status on the top grid of Alpha 2 and Alpha 3, the 2 cells that the ants are on, like so. Next is the schmove step. All ants are going to move forward 1 cell. So this one's going to move 1 step to the right, and this one does the same. It does outline a procedure for if 2 ants end up on the same cell, which I will outline with the following hypothetical example. So say that we've just done the toggle step and the ants on the grid are as follows. Now we're on to the schmove step. Let's go ahead and schmove all ants 1 step forward. This one ends up here, but then these 2 ants are going to both end up on the same cell. If the ants are facing in different directions, all of them move another space forward. So this one's going to move up 1 more cell to here, and this one's going to move left 1 more cell to here. Now we have 2 ants facing the same direction on the same cell. If the ants are facing the same direction, all but 1 ant move another space forward. So we're going to take this one and move him 1 space forward. So this would be the result of the schmove step in that situation. Okay, now that we've done the schmove step, we're on to the 3rd and final step of an iteration, which I call the rotate step. And by the way, if any ant leaves the grid, so if an ant were to be on the schmove stage and it wants to move here, then it would be moving off the grid, and this would this would signify the end of the ant step. But we're not there yet, so we don't get hasty. We're on the rotate step. Each ant turns to the left if it ends up on a black cell, or to its right if it ends up on a white cell. After this, repeat steps 2 through 5. So if an ant turns to its left, that means it's going counterclockwise. So let's get a screenshot here. I'm just going to put 4 directions on it real quick. So right, up, left, and down. If we're moving counterclockwise, we're moving from right to up to left to down to right. And if we're moving clockwise, we're moving from right to down to left to up to right. So moving left means we go counterclockwise if we're on a black cell, and we move right if we end up on a white cell, or we're going to move clockwise, or rotate clockwise. The ant on Bravo 2 is on a black cell, so it turns counterclockwise from right to up. And the ant at Bravo 3 is on a white cell, so it turns from right to down. I'm representing the ants with either a V, a less than, a right than, or a caret to signify the direction it's pointing. Alright. So, we've done our first iteration of the ant step. The ant stage, I should call it. So now we're going to repeat the same 3 steps. First, toggle. Toggle the states of all cells that the ants are on. Next, the schmove step. All ants move 1 step forward in the direction that they are facing. Now the rotate step. The ant at Bravo 1 is on a black cell, so it's going to move counterclockwise from up to left. And the ant on Bravo 4 is on a white cell, so it's going to move clockwise from down to left. Let's start over. First, toggle. Then, shmove. Then, rotate. The ant at Alpha 1 is on a black cell, so it's going to move counterclockwise from left to down. Same thing happens with the cell at Alpha 4, black cell, so it moves from left to down. Toggle. Shmove. Rotate. Bravo 2 is a white cell, so this ant moves clockwise from down to left. And Alpha 5 is black, so this ant moves counterclockwise from down to right. Toggle. Shmove. And this ant is going to leave the grid. This ant ends up here. And because an ant has left the grid, this signifies that we have reached the end of the ant stage. In fact, we can actually input the state of the ants right now onto the module. Let's press the clear button to clear the grid. If you need to see the initial state at any time, you can just press the reset button. So, let's go over how the ant input works. It's pretty simple. If you press an arrow, well, first off, you need to make sure you are on the ant's input method by clicking the button, and then it'll have a white border. You can click the ant button to rotate the ant on the button, and this will be the perspective that the ant will look when you place it in the grid. If you place an ant in the grid but want to change its orientation, all you have to do is rotate the ant on the button to the correct orientation, then click the ant again. If you want to remove the ant from the board completely, then just click the ant when the button has the same orientation as the ant on the board. When you click an arrow, the ant button will automatically orient the ant in the direction the arrow is pointing. So we're going to place one of our ants to the left of Alpha 2, and when we do so, the ant button is going to move to the left. We have one other ant, and it's pointing right at Bravo 5. Okay, so we have finished all of our business with the ants. But we're not quite done yet. We still have one more step. Perform another iteration of Game of Life on the resulting grid, once again ignoring the ants. Alright, one more iteration of Game of Life. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. White with 4 neighbors dies. White with 4 neighbors dies. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. White with 4 neighbors dies. Black with 5 neighbors stays dead. White with 5 neighbors dies. White with 4 neighbors dies. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black with 4 neighbors dies, or stays dead. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. Black with 5 neighbors stays dead. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. Black with 3 neighbors comes alive. White with 1 neighbor dies. Black with 3 neighbors comes alive. Black with 3 neighbors comes alive. Black with 2 neighbors comes alive. And black with... Sorry, that was white with 2 neighbors. It stays alive. And then black with 2 neighbors stays dead. This should be the final state of the grid. I'm going to double check really quickly. Everything looks good with those cells. A lot of these died because they had, like, so many neighbors. Yeah, this looks good. Okay. So, this is the final state of the black and white cells on the grid. Let's go ahead and input those Game of Life style. So we have 1, 2, 5, then skip, then 1, 5, then 1, 3, 4, 5, then 2, 3, 4, with columns of 3, 2, 2, 2, 3. And when we press submit, we get a solved module. I'll do one more example with more ants. First things first, let's read off the black and white states of the cells. We have 2, then 3, then 2, 3, 4, 5, then 4, 5, then 2, 3, 4, 5. And the ants are located at Bravo 1 facing down, at Charlie 1 facing down, at Delta 3 facing up, and at Charlie 4 facing right. Okay. Let's get anting. First off, game of life. Black with 1 neighbor stays dead. White with 1 neighbor dies. Black with 2 neighbors stays dead. Black with 1 neighbor stays dead. Black with no neighbor stays dead. Black with 2 neighbors stays dead. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. White with 4 neighbor dies. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. Black with 2 neighbors stays dead. Black with 1 neighbor stays dead. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. White with 4 neighbor dies. White with 5 neighbors dies. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. Black with 2 neighbors stays dead. Black with 4 neighbors stays dead. Black with 7 neighbors stays dead. White with 7 neighbors dies. White with 5 neighbors dies. Black with 1 neighbor stays dead. White with 1 neighbor dies. White with 3 neighbors. White with 3 neighbors stays alive. White with 4 neighbors dies. And white with 3 neighbors stays alive. A lot of death here, but most of the whites were clustered together, so kind of expected. Alright. We're done with the first game of life stage, now we're moving on to the ant stage. First, toggle. Next, schmoove. Then, rotate. Bravo 2 is black, this one moves counterclockwise from down to right. Same thing here at Charlie 2, black, this moves counter from down to right. Let's see, this is Delta 2 is black, this one moves counterclockwise from up to left. And this cell's also black, so it moves from right to up. I'm sorry, did I ask you to play the only Connect theme? I don't think so. Double checking from right to up is counterclockwise. Okay. We've rotated, now let's toggle. Next, let's schmoove. These 2 ants here are going to just trade places. And then this ant is going to end up on the same space as this ant. So because they're facing different directions, they're both going to move 1 space forward. Now we have these 2 on the same space. One of them is going to move 1 step forward because they face the same direction. And now we rotate. Bravo 2 is white, so this one rotates clockwise from left to up. Delta 2 is white, this one rotates clockwise from right to down. Echo 2 is black, this moves counterclockwise from right to up. And Delta 3 is clockwise, this one's white, this moves clockwise from up to right. I'm going to double check this real quick. Clockwise, then counter, then clockwise. Cool. Toggle. Schmoove. Rotate. Bravo 1 is white. This moves clockwise from up to right. Echo 1 is black. This moves counterclockwise from up to left. Delta 3 is black. This moves counterclockwise from down to right. Echo 3 is clockwise. This moves clockwise. It's white. It moves clockwise from right to down. Toggle. Schmoove. Rotate. Charlie 1 is white. This moves clockwise from right to down. Delta 1 is black. This moves counterclockwise from left to down. Echo 3 is black. This moves counterclockwise from right to up. And Echo 4 is black. This one moves counterclockwise from down to right. Toggle. Schmoove. And this ant leaves the grid. This signifies the end of the ant stage, so let's input our ants. First off, Clear the grid. Now let's input the ants. So we have ants facing down at Charlie 2 and Delta 2, and then an ant facing up at Echo 2, and then an ant left the grid from the right side of Echo 4. Alright, so we have placed our ants. We don't need them anymore. Now we need to perform one more iteration of Game of Life. Let's do it. Okay then. Black with no neighbor stays dead. Black with one neighbor stays dead. Black with two neighbors stays dead. White with three neighbors stays alive. White with two neighbors stays alive. Black with one neighbor stays dead. Black with two neighbors stays dead. White with three neighbors stays alive. Black with three neighbors stays dead. Or, my bad, that's 6 neighbors, yeah. And then white with 4 neighbors dies. Black with one neighbor stays dead. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black with 5 neighbors stays dead. White with 6 neighbors dies. White with 4 neighbors dies. Black with 1 neighbor stays dead. Black with 3 neighbors comes alive. White with 4 neighbors dies. White with 6 neighbors dies. White with 4 neighbors dies. Black with 0 neighbors stays dead. Black with 2 neighbors stays dead. White with 2 neighbors stays alive. Black with 5 neighbors stays dead. And white with 2 neighbors stays alive. Not a lot of activity, just this cell turned on, these 5 turned off, and so did this one, and that was it. Alright, let's input this. Make sure you're in black and white mode. And then we have 4, 5, 3, 2, 2, 3, 5. Columns of 0, 2, 2, 1, 2. And that is a solved game of ants. Yes, that is Spiral of Ants. Yes, Speaking Evil is based. That is it for the tutorial. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.